Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And I am super excited about our guest that I've brought to you today. And we'll talk about how I met her here in just a minute. But first, let me introduce you to Alison Henderson, CEO of Moving Image Consulting, a company that focuses on sales training, team building, and leadership development. Today, she joins us to discuss the art of body language in the professional environment and the role it plays in interviews in the usual workday. As a body language and presentation consultant, she will share her expert tips to help you present the best version of yourself in order to see better, greater success. You would think this was my first time doing an intro? Not true. So anyway, I would love to welcome Alison onto the show. Hey.
Hi, thanks so much, Casey.
It's so great to see you again. It was so funny. I was telling Marissa, who helps with the podcast earlier today, I was like, I have an option on my calendar that you can either choose a phone call or a Zoom. And when you came up, it was a Zoom. And I was like, we were just supposed to have an introduction. And I'm like, oh yeah, body language expert. Of course she's going to choose the Zoom. So
Zoom is great. I personally am very happy that it's grown in so much popularity, and now I get to see more people face to face than just over the phone.
It's definitely transformed the way we do business remotely, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and really overnight. I mean, just
overnight.
Boom.
Yeah.
Everything turned virtual, and it really was quite the adjustment for many households.
Well, and I, fortunately didn't have any small children at home or school-age children, which I can't even imagine what that looks like. But, for me, even just managing me, getting, we got a call and they said, come get what you need and go back home. That's it, And that's how my COVID started, my pandemic. So.
Right. Yeah, it became, okay, here's the date to come get your kids' stuff. And they cleared their lockers and put them in bags with their names on it. And you drove up and they shoved it in the car and you drove away. And there was no going back. So definitely it was really probably for at least, my generation, the weirdest kind of thing that's ever happened to us, for sure.
That is so crazy. So I always like to start our podcast to talk about how I met someone. So do you remember how we met?
Well, it was a good thing that you mentioned Frank before we got on today, because I was like, oh, that's right. Because earlier today, I was like, it's been so long since we had that conversation. I was truly trying to figure it out myself. I was like, how did we get? Because you're not close to me at all. So.
I know, right? Yeah, no, we met through the great connector. I tell people all the time, I think all connections lead back to Frank at some point, right? He's super connector. He was on the show a couple of episodes ago talking about why it's so important to connect. And meeting you is a prime example of why it's important to connect with people because, by connecting with him, I've connected with you, and I know you're going to introduce me to other amazing people as well. So connections are important.
For sure. Pay it forward all the time.
That's right. That's right. So let's just dive into it. So being a body language expert, how did you get to be a body language expert?
Oh, well, my roots are in theater and directing. So the observation part of the body language work that I do really came quite naturally. But as you probably know, if you have any actors by night who need day jobs that come to you, I had the day job to support my theater habit. And there was so much more drama going on in my offices that I was working at than there ever was like on my stage at night. I was a little perplexed by that and a little dismayed, I guess. And just had, there's got to be a way to fix this, because so often I, as the outsider, because let's face it, I was a secretary, I was an admin, I was very low on the totem pole. So I was able to sort of have an outside view, and I kept thinking, this isn't personal so often, and everybody's taking everything so personally. What is it about the communication that's missing? And I ended up going back to school and getting certifications in these different body language observation modalities. So I'm technically a certified movement pattern analyst is my fancy title. And really that means that I'm trained to watch your body language and connect it to the thought processes in the brain, which is why it's so important for businesses or for interviewing and human resources and things like that, because being able to observe another human being for what they're thinking means you can change your communication to fit what they need to hear. And so often we do the opposite. We all know about listening to respond rather than listening to really have a communication moment. But this really has helped me bring to teams the idea that it isn't something personal, it's that you think differently than each other. And if you can get over that barrier of my thought process doesn't match your thought process, which means I need to respond to you in a different way, then teams work so much more smoothly and they're saving so much time redoing projects or overworking each other, the overlap that happens, or silos come down in our businesses because finally people are communicating.
Have you read Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, Talking to Strangers?
No, I should write that one down.
So the reason I bring it up is because it's so fascinating what you just said about, connecting the what you're saying, the thoughts to the movement or the movement to the thoughts, right? And he is talking about like all the issues. Like for one thing, he's talking about Adolf Hitler and how Chamberlain went in, talked to him, and came back and said, yes, we've got this. He's good. He signed the contract. He's not going to invade all these other countries and all that kind of stuff based on his body language when he met with him in person. And I think that that's just fascinating. So it's a book you would probably really enjoy. I'm about halfway through it.
Yeah, for sure.
So back to you. What role does body language play in how you communicate your skill set when you're in a job interview?
The body language really is the believability piece, because so many of our answers these days are practiced and rehearsed. Because we have the internet and we have all of these blogs and we work with career coaches and things that I believe the HR professional or the manager, whoever it is that you're interviewing with, is looking for your body language to support the words that are coming out of your mouth, because anybody can create a really great script for their skill set. But if there's something that's wrong in the truth of it, it's going to come through their body. And they're not necessarily going to know. They're not going to say, oh, they tilted their shoulders when they were talking about this, and that doesn't match what was coming out of their mouth. I mean, I could say that to them, but they just know in their gut that something's off. They have that doubt that comes in because our body always betrays our words. We can't help it because the body brain connection is so close that really you can only control your body movements for so long. And if an interview lasts longer than 10 or 15 minutes, they always talk about in body language, or the FBI agents that talk about interviewing people that things leak out, and that it really is that body language leaks that give people doubt in what it is that they're saying. So the confidence level that you need to have when you're explaining your skill set and the practice that needs to go behind it is actually greater than what I think a lot of people maybe spend preparing for their interview. They might prepare it going it through their mind, but until they really engage their body and speak it out loud, they may not have practiced to the right level that they need to overcome their nervousness and all of the anxiety that you feel when you go into this, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person.
So, question for you. Let's say I'm a candidate and I was fired from my last job, and I don't want you to know that as the interviewer, right? And so you ask me, why did you leave your last job? And I give you an answer that's not true. What signs, what body language should I be looking for to know that they're not telling me the truth?
It would be great, to hold on to that question until 5 or 10 minutes into the interview, because as I said, of those leaks coming out. But you would also have a better baseline for their normal behavior, because what you're going to notice or what you're going to be looking for is a change to that normal behavior. When we are untruthful, we normally clamp down on our natural movements, because we have read enough things that know that our body will lie for us, so we don't move in order to try to prevent any lie from it coming off in the body. So if somebody has been very warm and they've been gesturing with you and everything seems really great, and then you ask them that question and they sort of freeze, or they bring everything down, then there is something to that. Or it could even be the opposite. Maybe you have somebody who's really reserved the entire time, and then you ask them that question and suddenly they're like, oh, well, let me tell you what happened, or let me tell a funny story that and you're like, well, that was an interesting answer. You haven't answered anything like that up until now. So it really is, for the average eye, that's what the limbic brain is going to be reacting to. It reacts to changes in what we're seeing. And so that's where that doubt's going to creep in, because it's going to say, that was not the you of 5 minutes ago. So which one do I believe? And the minute there's doubt, usually we go negative anyway. Like, we're not going to believe the next thing you say and the next thing you say, because we already have that doubt in our mind. And it may mean that we're looking more strictly at the resume then for a few seconds and trying to come up with some other questions that maybe they are being dishonest about on their resume.
That's a good point. So let's switch this to the importance of the person who is interviewing the candidate. How important is that body language in what importance does the body language play in listening?
The best thing about body language and listening is that you can do what I call listen with your eyes. So the more open-ended questions that you ask as the person who's doing the interview, that gives you a chance to watch the body language of the candidate. And if the candidate is smart, they have begun the interview with asking you questions about the company so that they see you exhibit body language yourself, and then they can change a little bit accordingly. But oftentimes candidates are really nervous and they just let you go right on in and ask your questions. So if that's the case, then ask away so that you get a sense for who they are. And then that will give you that baseline for, as I said, if they change their behavior, or if you get a feeling that the style of this person doesn't fit the culture of the company, or maybe won't mesh with the other people on the team. People really should go with their gut, at least initially. And then if they're like, but they're so paper, let's have somebody else interview them if they think. Because like tends to hire like, so we do tend to warm up to people who exhibit similar body movements to ourselves, first and foremost. So it could be your gut reaction is that they just process very differently than you, which is that friction that I already mentioned. And they need to interview with somebody else just to see if there's consensus on this not fit for the office or not fit for the team. But the more you talk, then you show body language. The more you listen and have the other person talk, you can read theirs. And it's so much more helpful to you to read their body language while you're sitting there than it is, for you to do all the talking.
That is so good. And I'm sitting here because I'm sitting here super still, just hanging on every little word that you're saying right now. But I want to kind of talk a little bit about, how to read the body language. We gave an example earlier, but I just think it's so essential for professionals at all levels that they know how to read that body language. What are some signals that you can get from your audience to know whether they're engaged or not engaged?
Most people know the cliche, looking at their watch, answering their phone, heaven forbid, in the middle of the interview, something plops up and they stare at it, those sorts of things. But really, I think the key to someone not being engaged is you can almost watch their face even more than their body, because most people will keep some kind of pleasant expression, or at least slightly, if they're engaged. They're not going to have what we now know as resting Zoom face, right? The the total, they're here, they're listening, and it's like they just check out.
Or you see them look over here and they have another computer screen, right?
Right, and exactly. They're looking at something else. They're totally distracted and they're not engaged. The thing with engagement that sometimes trips people up, however, is that men and women nod for different reasons. So if a woman is nodding, usually that's, yes, I'm with you, keep going. We tend to nod and yes, oh, absolutely, great job. Men read that as agreement. So it may be that a male candidate comes out of your office and thinks, she agreed with everything I said. I nailed it. I nailed the interview. Is really shocked or dismayed or coming back to you like, how could you not hire me? You were totally in agreement with me, or what, or they're going back to their, to whoever's helping them, with their job search, their recruiter, and saying, that was BS. What's going on? And the opposite could be happening for a male-female interaction on the other end. If it's a male interviewing a female and she sees a lot of nodding, which is that he's agreeing, he's not necessarily wanting her to continue to speak. And so sometimes women fall into the trap of these really long answers because they're taking in the signal of, oh, okay, I don't know that I have anything else to say, but I'm going to stretch out this answer because he's still nodding at me, so we have to remember that. Just there's a little gender thing when it comes to engagement that sometimes can be misread.
That is the first time I've ever heard that. I had no idea.
Well, there you go.
A little knowledge bomb right there in the middle of the show.
Well, look at it next time you're in a group meeting, and just notice when the men nod and notice when the women are nodding. You'll probably see the difference right before your eyes.
I don't think I'll ever be able to not see the difference anymore now that it's been brought to my attention.
Yeah, I've ruined you. That's it. I've ruined you.
I was sitting here as you were talking about that, and I was thinking about, because I've done thousands of interviews because I'm a recruiter, and so I interview candidates on behalf of other companies. And I can tell you there are times when candidates will go on and on and on and on. And I mean, to the point where it's only happened once, I yawned. How's that for body language? And they still didn't get it.
Well, if they didn't get the signal with that, then they are really self-absorbed and not paying any attention.
They were just I'm like, you've got to quit talking so much because I need to ask you questions, and that's not important, So I don't know why that episode or that little incident came to mind when you were talking about that, but I was like, yawning's pretty clear. Pretty clear. So just other than my yawning in an interview, what are some of the mistakes people make when it comes to body language, and how can that be corrected?
Probably the two top problems that I see pretty consistently is posture and energy. And they really go hand in hand, because if somebody has decent posture, they're sitting up in their chair and they look executive. There's just a difference between this and this, right? And there's for those of you who are only listening from from kind of slouching and rolling and collapsing your shoulders to sitting up straight and commanding the room. And interviewers really need to understand that interviewees need to understand that they should be commanding the space and showing the potential for leadership and executive. Even if they're not going after an executive level position, they need to give the impression that they could handle that responsibility, because companies don't want to be hiring over and over and over again. They want to put you on a trajectory to grow with their company. And if they don't see the potential of executive level or leadership level in you, they're probably not going to be as apt to hire you. And so often, I just feel like I see people who are, and it's not a huge slouch. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think they weren't sitting up straight unless you saw the difference of how their energy rises, and it helps their tonality of their voice because they're taking in more breath, and they tend to relax a little bit or look less stressed because they're taking in more oxygen. It just helps so many things. That posture, and most of us have poor posture because we have rounded ourselves over time with our phones and
at a computer,
being on the computer and everything. Like, just, we have collapsed as a society in general. And so you really look above and beyond all the other candidates that someone has seen that day if you just think, I'm going to go in there with really great posture. And it doesn't have to be military style. You don't have to throw your shoulders way back, but if you take a nice deep breath and raise your sternum and keep it there when you exhale, that's kind of the trick that I usually tell people, is just take a nice breath, and then just wherever your chest ended up without your shoulders being raised, because that looks funny, but as long as you can take a deep breath and then keep it there. It will also help with your gesturing, so that maybe you don't gesture like a penguin, because if you take a deep breath in, you tend to put what I call more air in your pits as you're gesturing as well. So probably all of you that are listening to the podcast are want to go over to the YouTube video because of the demonstrations that are going on right now. But yeah, a little bit of air in your gestures, it helps you to look more alive, and as I said, more executive in general.
So more air in your pits is what you said, right?
Yeah, air in your pits and air in your lungs. How's that? So, take in more air, and it'll give you more energy. You will look more engaged, and your body language will improve, because you'll most likely give off some more signals than perhaps you normally would. And part of the game is giving the person who's interviewing you enough signals to make a decision. If being really tiny and poised and closed off and small is not necessarily the way to win in this day and age, because the competition is fierce in most fields, particularly right now with so many people being furloughed and businesses closing or downsizing and all of those things, that you have to advocate for yourself. And part of the way you do that is by going after it and having a smile and putting on that great presence when you're in the interview.
Getting some air in your pits.
Yeah.
I'm so going to use that from now on.
Tell all of your clients now, you have to have
be like, take a deep breath. We need some air in our pits.
Those things and everything, you live in a hot state. It helps with, with all that.
Exactly. You've shared that more than 70% of the communication is nonverbal, right? Which blows my mind. And, as a recruiter, a lot of my candidates' first step will be a phone interview. So how do we communicate that body language in a phone interview?
Well, the funny thing is, and some people don't tend to believe me, but you do the same thing as you would live. So I even usually tell people, stand up.
Yep.
Take the phone call standing. Doesn't mean you're wandering around necessarily, because you don't want your mind to wander. If your body's wandering, your mind might wander, and you may not focus your answers. But when you stand up, there's a better chance of you having better posture, taking in more breath. That's going to help your voice come across as more energized and more lively. And the other thing for the phone interview too is to be aware of succinct answers, because you can go on a little bit longer live than I think people listen to over the phone. It just may be taking off a sentence or two on some of your answers that you've sort of planned out ahead of time, so that it isn't you don't want to say boring the other person on the other line, but it's very easy for them to get distracted too, because
Yeah.
they're not looking at you. So they could be looking at emails that are coming in or all sorts of things that are distracting. And as soon as there's silence, oh, it's my turn again. And if they've kind of not paid attention to the very end, it'll bring them back as well. So it can also be good for your listener.
I like to ask my candidates to smile as well when they're on the phone.
Absolutely. It helps your vocal timbre, and you really can hear a smile. If you have somebody, do a test and say, okay, answer this just without a smile, or answer it with a smile, the energy will come through the call when they put that smile on.
So this is the question that I've really been building up to, and that I think you more than anybody else can answer. So such weird times that we're living in right now, and we try to keep the show pretty evergreen, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the pandemic because I think it's important, and that masks are required, I believe, in almost every state now, for the most part. So how does that change? Because now we lose half of our body language, at least our facial body language. How has that changed us, and how do we work around that?
Well, for one thing, masks are basically requiring us to be even more animated than we normally would. And I'm already an advocate, as you can tell, for having a little bit more movement or more facial expressions and more body
They
language
told me to
going
sit
on.
still during the podcast.
It's a good thing they're not on my side. So with the mask on, there's a couple things. For one, you feel like because they can't see your face, you need to overdo your reaction so that they really come through your eyes. Because you can have surprise and be like, oh, but that doesn't necessarily show through unless it's, oh, right, there's a difference. I call it like cartoon eyes. Like if you think about it, back in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons or those kind of things, when the eyes were like a ooga and they jumped out of the screen, that you almost have to think on those terms. So I've been working with some teachers on how they're going to go back into the classroom, and some things they could do with their kids. So that's one of the tips I've been giving them. Call it cartoon eyes and ask the kids to have more expression. But it's a little bit of reaching back to your inner child and thinking so that you give yourself permission to be a little bit bigger with your body language and your emotions. When a 5-year-old is having a tantrum in the middle of the store because they're not permitted to get the cookies that they want, there's no question as to what they're emoting, and there's no question to their body language. It is clear as day.
They're on the floor.
Over time, we've been taught to tamp it down and to become, a functioning member of society, and to control yourselves and prim and proper and etiquette and all of those things. So if you kind of tap into that inner child just a little bit when you have the mask on, you will naturally exhibit a little bit more body language to help people. Sometimes I say it's sort of like a cross between bad Shakespearean, acting and pantomime, something you almost feel like, because you've got this mask on and you're like, why am I gesturing so big? What's going on with my body?
I want to be heard.
Because I'm frustrated because I can't tell what you want from me, and so I'm overdoing what I want from you. But yeah, and really the other thing, particularly if you're interviewing, is articulation. I call it chewing your words. You have to use your lips, teeth, tip of the tongue to make consonants. It's the only way we know the difference between one word and the next are the consonants. Otherwise, you're sitting across from somebody and it sounds like all vowels, and you don't have any idea as to what they said, and you have to keep asking them to repeat themselves, and that makes them nervous. So ahead of time, do some tongue twisters and warm up your mouth and your face, and then put the mask on so that you can be understood and are loud enough on top of that to really get through the mask, depending on the style that you have and how many layers it is. And do you have a filter in there or those kinds of things? Because some of these masks are getting pretty high tech now,
It's
and it seems like there's more layers in there than maybe we need for communication.
I never thought that I would have so many masks in my purse. It's
At one
ridiculous.
time, right?
It's
You
like an
have
accessory.
the backup in the car and
Yep.
2 or 3 in your purse because you never know with me, with children riding with me, if they've forgotten theirs, Yeah, who would have ever thought now it's you can't leave without your phone, your water bottle, and your mask. I
Exactly.
mean,
Oh my gosh, our time has flown by today. So I definitely want to get to our VIP questions. Oh, excuse me. So are you ready for those?
okay.
All right.
Yes.
If you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you take with you?
Well, first thought came to mind was Lin-Manuel Miranda because I would want somebody to rap to me and to sing show tunes. Uh, because I think he's absolutely brilliant and it would be so fun to be trapped with him. Second I had on my list was Hugh Jackman, kind of for the same thing.
Andy's cute.
Wolverine, my son's name is Logan. There's just, he's kind of a hottie, even though he's getting older. So I think, and he sings show tunes. So I would be happy to have him with me. And then just to make sure that my husband isn't left behind, I think I would take him over my kids. At the moment. So I'd have the 3 men in my life, I think is who I would take. Because I thought, is there any stuff that I need? And I'm like, I don't know that I need stuff. I think it's, I would need relationship. I would need communication. I wouldn't be one of
You
those
need
people
body
that's
language.
like, no, I don't want to take anybody with me. I'm by myself.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I'm really curious about this next question. So what is one thing you do each morning to set your day up for success?
Well, it may be surprising for people that have listened to this interview, but I actually use meditation podcasts. So I have a couple that I listen to, interchangeably because people don't necessarily post every day. And I'm sort of one of those people that doesn't like to read for some reason. But I really do at the beginning of my day, I have to put in some headphones and breathe and center. Because I can tend to be a little spastic if I haven't done that prep work. And sometimes I add movement to it as well. I have some movement scales from my training that can help to center. So if I feel like my brain is still a little uncentered, or if I know I have a lot of sales calls that day, which aren't the most pleasant for me, I'll do some movement as well to get my body ready, which some people think, really? It's like, yes, you have to get your voice ready and your body ready and all of that. So I meditate.
Absolutely. And I will share with you, there is a meditation on YouTube. It's called Great Meditation. Love it. They post about every 3 days. And it's
I
just
will check. Yeah. There's one that I like that's called Meditation Minis because they're usually 10 minutes or less.
These are 10
and so,
minutes.
of course, the quick person in me, if I only have a few minutes, that's one of my go-tos as well.
All right. So for our final VIP question, if your life was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
Meet the Energizer Bunny of body language.
I love that. That is awesome and so true.
That's usually what people always come back to me. You have so much energy. Well, in order to convince you that this is important and that you need it in your life, I think I'm big to, demonstrate. And usually I have to be doing a lot of demonstration. And so that makes me a little bit bigger than the average bear when it comes to body language.
I love that. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about body language?
Well, they should look up movingimageconsulting.com. My YouTube channel has tons of content on there, but please subscribe. Like, help me with some subscribers, man. This a lot of I get views, but hit subscribe. That you can search me on just under Moving Image Consulting on YouTube as well, and you'll find it. Those are the 2 main ways, or just from the website, you can email me and check it out, or connect with me on LinkedIn too. Use my name, though, not Moving Image on that. Use Alison Henderson to find me on LinkedIn.
And we'll put some notes, or we'll put some addresses in the show notes so that people can have an easier time finding you. This has been so much fun. I was not disappointed at all. So Alison, I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Oh, yay.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.